Start a small business. No need to work 40, 50 hours a week, slaving your life away. Obtain financial freedom, be your own boss, and create your own destiny. Moguls are the new superstars. The path to country club membership and a leased Mercedes-Benz is paved in gold as you take your business trips to Orlando or Vegas. Validation from your in-laws is just an LLC and Facebook business page away. At least, that's what they tell you anyways. Through social media, websites, and targeted ads, you're sold an image. Small business owners seem to walk on water. You'd think you're the last person on earth working a regular job with a regular boss. But there's trouble in paradise, and its name is in over your head. People start looking to start their own business, don't know what they don't know. But that's why we started our Small Business Confidential podcast, to share what we've learned from years of experience. There's not a lot of people in on this, so remember, dear podcast listeners, you heard it here first, off the record, on the QT, and very hush-hush.
Hi, everybody. This is Mike Riley. I've got my two sidekicks here, A'marri and Brook, and we're going to be talking about managing and coaching. And we're going to also spin this over to our Small Business Confidential podcast for those listeners. And for those listeners who've been following us on the Cleveland Browns Anonymous, you might want to check us out at Small Business Confidential. This time we're going to have a twofer. So this will be covered in both of our podcasts. So we're talking about managing. Let's talk about managing first. Managing a sports team, managing a company. And the first thing you have to understand is you can be a genius with an MBA, or you can be the world's brightest offensive coordinator, or you can be like a Hall of Fame player. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good coach and a good manager. They require skill sets that cannot necessarily be taught in school. When you are the head coach or you are the manager of a company, the CEO, you've got your own business, you are dealing with issues that nobody has ever prepared you for. So on that note, Brook, what are the things that good coaches, good managers need to have?
I think off the bat, you need to be comfortable with confrontation. You need to get used to confrontation. And I can relate that to managing employees, managing your customers, managing your teammates, your players. If someone's acting up, if a player's being entitled, not going in on third downs, if the customer refusing to pay over some lame excuse, you got an employee showing up late or an employee talking back, you need to be able to confront that, because if you don't, problem will just get worse and worse. I'm not saying that's the most important thing. I think that's just kind of the first thing I thought of.
What's your thoughts, A'marri?
I think you always need to have a finely tuned radar for when, whether it's an employee or whoever, a sub, when they're pulling you too much into their world, their own personal problems, their own personal needs, wishes, requests, particularly with no empathy for what you need. When it just becomes so focused and centered on, oh, well, I need this if I'm going to do this, and I need this. And, there's certain things that are legitimate. We've had a lot of conversations with people recently where it's like, you got a question, go ahead and ask, as long as it's specific to the work and how you can do your job the best that you can do it.
And how you support us. Actual thing. It can't be a one-way street.
Right. But when it's just purely, we're getting into fantasy land about your wish list for things that are purely convenient for you and inconvenient for us, we're getting off the key of music, as we say. So you have to always be aware of that. But then the other side of that too is confronting it in the moment, like Brook is saying. And we've had those moments, and, Brook's brought up a couple good examples in our meetings recently where confronting that right in that moment, you get that kind of shocked face from that person because they're not even expecting you to go there. But it's just, once again, establishing the relationship you need to have, whether it's an employer, supervisor, coach, whatever. It's like, you're part of my team, or you're part of my company. You're a part of this. We're not a part of you being absorbed into your world here.
Well, let's tie this to some real examples. Let's, with the Cleveland Browns, for example. And I don't care what profession you were in, football, baseball, sports, managing a restaurant. The first thing the locker room or the employees look at, am I being treated fairly? Or are there 2 or 3 different rules for different people? Obviously, in my company that I started, I have long-time employees. I also have 3 of my kids working in the business who grew up in the business. And I've got to make sure that everybody is treated fairly in that business. That doesn't necessarily happen in a lot of family-run businesses where you could have a knucklehead son who clearly should not be running the company, yet has been promoted because he's the son of the owner. But on the other hand, you don't want to have unfair rules for your kids to make an example out of them in front of your longtime employees. That's not fair to them. Take a look at the Browns and how they handled the whole Deshaun Watson situation. He's played terribly. He played terribly last year. He was going outside the pocket. He wasn't making his reads properly. The offense had to be broken down. Bill Callahan got kicked out. They brought in a terrible offensive coordinator. They brought in a terrible offensive line coach, all to cater to a guy who played terribly. And this is where the Browns, especially, like a lot of underperforming companies, they just fail because the culture is toxic. You've got different standards of play. We've got a guy like Jerry Jeudy. Why is he starting? I said this in the last podcast. When he's dropping the ball, there shouldn't be 2 sets of rules. I'm struggling listening to some of the commentators, and I said this earlier in the podcast about how they are struggling to find out what's wrong with the Browns offense. What's wrong with the Browns offense is there's no sense of accountability, period. Now, I know that employees are watching how I'm handling different situations. Right, Brooke?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We got a guy who's not showing up, who's acting out. Are we going to let this guy go, this person go? Or are we going to bend our rules to accommodate him because, well, we need a guy, you know what? Or we paid him all this money. We paid Deshaun Watson all this money. So we're just going to have to bend the rules. And that's what happened with the Browns. That's why the culture is terrible. You compare that with the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton. He made Russell Wilson's life miserable. Took away his office, private office. Here, you sit next to the center. Get to know him, right? Your family's not coming in here. Your private office. Pat Riley, coach of the Lakers, famous saying, he said, nobody rides the bus. No entourage, no family, no friends. Nobody rides the team bus. He had hard and fast rules to build a team. So managing is going to test a quality you may not have, which is how to be a leader. We're not talking about a guy who got an MBA or a guy who was an defensive genius with his different schemes. These people crash and burn when they're asked to be a leader. Your thoughts, Brooke?
Yeah, I think, I was listening to my fantasy football podcast, which I listen to on one of my days where I go for a long run. And the title of their podcast was the top 5 most dysfunctional teams in the NFL. Browns came in at number 4, which I was like, all right. Yeah. Number 1, we're not the Jets. But when they ticked off those teams, they all had a very consistent problem where it was just massively dysfunctional and the culture was off. And I think that when it comes to finding like a good head coach, or I can make the analogy of like a good boss in a contracting company, most of the time it's not the young whiz offensive coordinator or the guy who's really good at selling or diagnosing a plumbing problem. I mean, yeah, like that helps, but are you able to lead men? Are you able to inspire your employees, inspire your players, hold them accountable? Like, I'm not the greatest like home contractor, but I think I'm a good leader. And I think that we see that a lot in our company where just because you're super talented, that does not mean that you're necessarily like a good fit or that you're necessarily a great leader. And you see that all the time with these like one and done, head coaches like the Hugh Jackson. Oh, he was the guru in Cincinnati. Relating it to the Browns and Kevin Stefanski, people keep saying, oh, he was this young hotshot offensive coordinator.
Wait, so
really wasn't.
So was Pat Shermer.
Well, no, my point is, I think and I know I'm getting into the Brown stuff now, but with Stefanski, he wasn't some offensive guru. He was the offensive coordinator for the Vikings for, I think, 2 seasons. I think he was a wide receivers coach. He was a defensive backs coach, but he wasn't Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan. I think the reason the Browns hired him, and you see it in his press conference, he's very organized. He seems like he's, at the time, I think the Hasms saw like, here's a guy who's going to stay organized. He's an adult. He's composed. I think they were just so used to, the Freddie Kitchens firing from the hip in these press conferences and Hugh Jackson, just letting players, I don't know, run wild. But I think with Stefanski, the Hasms said, you know what, let's just see what he's got. He seems like he's an adult. But now you're seeing, I think we can all agree, I think, he's reached his limit as a coach. Well, you're seeing it in the play. You're seeing it when Jerry Jeudy dropping passes. You're seeing it with Myles Garrett, some of his comments after the Steelers game.
One of the things that if we diagnose how the Browns, or if you've got a small business, I want to keep making sure I touch that stone. Who are you going to promote as your manager? Who's going to be your assistant manager? Who's going to be your foreman? Who's going to be that person you entrust responsibility in? And what is shocking about the Browns, and I'm going to address the media on this as well, is how clueless they are in terms of hiring a head coach. I mean, you can talk all you want about the quarterbacks, 41 quarterbacks. How about the coaches that we've hired? I mean, it's not like these guys we hired went off to another team like Baker Mayfield, nailed it. These people were not competent leaders. And just as a curiosity, I went and looked at online Kevin Stefanski's first press conference when he was hired. And I mean, he nailed it. They were just raving about this guy. We got an adult in a room, paired him up with Andrew Berry. I mean, this is now we're seeing a little bit of the Cleveland Indians, Guardians. Just finally, we got some people that are smart, that can figure it out. You know what he said that people kept repeating? Personality is welcome. Production is required. And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? When you look at it now, and you look at the last couple of years, starting with Baker's final year with the Browns, he was not producing. His shoulder was bad. His head was bad. As OBJ's dad showed on the video, he was missing wide open guys. He was clearly not. He needed to sit down and catch a breath. And Stefanski kept playing him. And this is number 2. We talk about leadership. Number 2 is, I don't want to hear a lot of rah-rah bullshit. Okay? I want you walking your own talk. And A'marri, I know you get this because you were sitting in with me when you first started here in the company on these interviews. Just show up for work, right? You wanna run with that?
Yeah, it gets to a point, and I know you are already used to it, but after doing so many interviews with you, it just gets to a point where you're just kind of like, yeah, I don't need to see your pictures of your past work. I don't need to hear about how great of a worker you are or this or that. It's, can you show up on time? And are you going to continue to do that consistently after the first week or two when you get your check? And then that's when we see guys, do the disappearing act, because really we're looking at it as a bus stop job.
And also they're living in a fantasy world. And maybe Kevin Stefanski, hey, no disrespect, him and his family. I'm sure he's a great guy, great dad, great husband, all good. This is not personal. But really, Kevin, production is required. You're not producing. The players you're playing are not producing. And nothing's being asked of them. Continue, A'marri.
Yeah, and one thing that we've been talking about recently is just making sure that those tardies, those absences, those incidents are all documented. So you don't have to have a memory lapse, or the other person can't have a memory lapse when you bring up, hey, I mean, you've been late every day for the past 6-7 days that you've been working. You missed this day, you missed that day, you're not making your hours. It all shows up in the data, in the numbers.
Yeah. Well, but here again, you don't wait for game 12 to pull Jerry Jeudy. I mean, at what point in time when he's leading the league in drop passes, do you actually pull him? Right? At what point in time? They just started the job and the day 2, they're late. And I'm listening for an apology. And we're talking about somebody, when you're late, and Brook, you're going to get this, right? You did your 6th grade talk on Vince Lombardi. You remember Lombardi time?
Isn't it like 10 minutes early?
1 minute early. 10 minutes early.
You're there at 6:50.
Yeah. 10 minutes early. That's Lombardi time. All right. Because what that shows is a commitment to the job. All right. That's why, the coach of the Miami Dolphins, he's about to be canned because players are running late for meetings. Sometimes they don't show up, whatever, and nothing happens. Okay. Nothing happens. And that's what, you drop a pass, you drop another pass, you commit a stupid penalty. Our special teams coach is on year 2 or 3. He's not getting fired. Meanwhile, you fire the best coach the Browns ever had in Bill Callahan. He's like the Carl Willis is to the pitching of the Guardians.
I don't think they fired him. He quit because his son became the head coach of the Titans, and that was always kind of a dream.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll cut them some slack. Fair enough. Fair point. But now,
I hired now because
I would run out of, you know what? If somebody asked me, I'm running down to hire this guy right now. Okay. I'm going to ask if we can get him back. He was great. But the fact of the matter is,
hey, let's stop here. We got to pay some bills. 30 seconds, and we'll be back.
If you enjoy listening to our Small Business Confidential podcast, we're sure you'll enjoy our first podcast, The Cleveland Real Estate Investor. We give outside investors an inside look into the real estate market in Cleveland. Cleveland has been on the rise, and investors from all over see those cheap prices and salivate. Our job is to educate those investors and steer them in the right direction with several years of experience of how to do it right and many examples of how to do it wrong. Find the Cleveland Real Estate Investor podcast on any app you listen to your podcast today.
A'marri, let's just show up for work. Every day you show up for work. And when you're late, and this is, we just had a guy in our company, he's a nice guy and whatever, but he has to leave at 2:30, right? Or 3 o'clock. And he shows up late on the days he has to leave early. You know what? You don't have to leave early. No, you call your other employer and tell them you're running late. Okay? Because what you're looking for, folks, when you're running a restaurant, when you're running a business, a landscaping business, a panty business, a football business, whatever, you are looking for those non-sexy things. I don't care how many degrees they had in college, what kind of grades they got. Are they going to show up for work with an appreciative attitude that's willing to thank you for giving them the opportunity to work? Or are you going to come at it entitled? You know, I was thinking about Deshaun Watson. I don't know this guy here. He's a nice guy, et cetera, et cetera. Where is the apology from him to the fan base? I'm sorry, you guys gave up X number of draft picks. How many? 3?
3.
You gave me a guaranteed money, and I haven't done shit for this city. Will somebody say that? Will somebody come out like Jimmy Haslam saying, this was my decision, I overruled Coach Stefanski, and I did the same dumb thing going after Deshaun Watson that I did with Johnny Manziel? Is there anybody that is accountable? And I think at the end of the day, whether you're running, your customers are expecting a level of commitment when they go to your restaurant, when they hire you, and the fan base are the Browns customers. They're the customers. And we got to listen to these press conferences. There's no apologies. I guess I don't know how to coach. I don't know why. And you know what? For you media out there, let me just unload. I was thinking about this today. The media who answered, the Mary Kays, the Dan Lobbies, they're talking to Stefanski. Can you ask him some pointed questions that the fans want to know? Why did you throw 58 times? Why didn't you move the pocket? Why didn't you just put 8 guys on the line and block from him if you're going to pass? You know, why are you playing a guy who keeps dropping the ball? Can we ask those kind of pointed questions? Because I know the fans would actually start listening to the press conference. Coach, you say week after week after week for the last year that you got to coach better. At what point in time are you going to resign? Right? Comments, Brook?
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to a couple of those press conferences, and there's definitely some media who ask pretty straightforward questions. And Stefanski's, it's almost like he's got like one of those like soundboards and just picks whichever soundboard will fit that question. I did hear something recently that kind of blew my mind, and this goes back to there being a culture, the whole thing about having a culture problem, whether it's a team or a company. So, Mike, what year recently would you say was the Browns like most like successful?
Oh, that's easy. That was the when they beat Pittsburgh in the playoff game.
Right. Okay. What was the major thing happening in the world around that time?
COVID.
Guess who wasn't in the building all the time?
Kevin Stefanski.
Jimmy Haslam.
Yeah.
And so there was
there you go.
There's a reporter who basically said, like, it's funny how when Jimmy, he literally didn't have a choice. He was like, well, I'm staying home. I'm not going into that. I have to wear gotta wear a mask in an office. No, he was probably, at home, and he let his team and his staff run the team. And it's ironic that was by far the Browns' most successful year, at least since I've been alive. They beat the Steelers. And the minute the building started opening up and Jimmy was back in and, JW and, his whole fucking family, that's when things just started to go south. So, hey, I'm not saying that Jimmy Haslam is the reason why the Browns are not successful, but he's a pretty big factor. And I think if we had hired like a Bill Parcells, he would look at Jimmy and be like, stay out of here.
Right.
Stay at home. Right. Hiring me.
Sean Payton
would do that.
How about Vince Lombardi?
Bill Parcells. So I don't know. I just keep going back to there is a culture problem with this team. I think they need to, and I hate to say this, but I think they need to blow it up. They need to hire a culture guy, and that culture guy needs to tell Jimmy Haslam, stay out of my business. If you're hiring me, you're hiring me. I'm in charge.
Okay, but let me touch the base of small business confidential here, because I'm the owner of this.
Oh, well, I'm not saying no.
No. But let me just no. I know that. I'm just saying that how to be an owner, how to be the CEO of a company is, let's take Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Barry. Let's take Mike Pettin and Ray Farmer, people with the Browns. And then you compare them with the Guardians, Chris Antonetti, right? I mean, they're running the team. And if they get interference from some knucklehead owner, they're going to walk. That's what Mike Pettin should have done. I don't want Johnny Manziel. No, I don't support this. I'm walking. Ray Farmer texting Mike Pettin on the sidelines to pull Brian Hoyer and play Johnny Manziel. You say, you do this again, I quit. Where is Mike Pettin saying, you know what? Why is Johnny Manziel not playing? He's partying too much, right? Why not say that? And if Mike Pettin got fired by Jimmy Haslam and Ray Farmer, there would be a mob descending on Berea with torches, pitchforks, and rope to hang Haslam and Ray Farmer. And that's the problem. It is so opaque there. There's no accountability. It's a culture that keeps repeating itself over and over again. And you have head coaches that are not prepared to be CEOs or leaders. You know what? We have situations, you've seen this, A'marri, where we'll have a customer who's acting out of line and we just tell them to back off. You want to add to that, A'marri? You've been in the seat watching that.
Yeah. I mean, it's, kind of what you're talking about as far as, the same rules apply to everyone. I mean, we're not going to take certain things from employees, and we're also not going to take, certain things from customers. Obviously the best case scenario is more money, less stress, and we're getting the job done, providing a good service, good communication, getting the job done, and the customer's happy. But, there's some circumstances where the customer, won't let us be the foreman, won't let us be the professionals, and wants to make mountains out of molehills for little things and harp on those, and just, it becomes so much more trouble than it's worth, which can provide good, education for me and Melanie, who, works on the podcast and watches the phones and coordinates the estimates, but it's like, we got to make sure that we're not letting those situations become just repeatable and we're just reactive to whatever manic emotions a small percentage of customers might have.
And I think what gets lost when you talk about a business and talk about a football organization, they get so consumed with the product. Well, I've got this smart product. I've got this, I've got that. And that's all they're thinking about. They're not thinking about the execution, how that product is being sold, how the back office is handling questions, how responsive is the follow-up, how is your company going out in uniforms, clean, showing up on time, trucks are washed. You walk into a restaurant, you can know right away whether they got their shit together by just going into the men's room. Is it clean? Do people seem like everybody's got a job to do? I mean, you go to L'Albatross, great restaurant in Cleveland, you don't see anybody looking at their phones. Okay? It's an ambiance. And the problem with the media, the problem with the Browns culture is they get so consumed in the savior mentality. When in reality, Dylan Gabriel could be a great quarterback. He could be the next Brian Sipe if he had some help. But, how does Brian Sipe become MVP? He had an organization that supported him, that believed in him. Bertie Kosar, same way. Look, who was the last great run the Browns had was in the late 80s, was Kosar. Well, guess who the coach was? Marty Schottenheimer. Schottenheimer was a defensive coordinator. He cut his teeth in special teams. Bill Cowher, special teams coach for the Browns, goes over to Pittsburgh and is soon, riding Pittsburgh to Super Bowls and playoffs. Bill Cowher, nobody said Bill Cowher was a genius, like Pat Shurmur, like Kevin Stefanski, like Hugh Jackson, the quarterback whisperer. Bill Cowher, Marty Schottenheimer, Vince Lombardi, who had to wait until his late 40s to get a head coaching spot. These people originally were not sexy, but they were blue-collar, bucket-type players like Sean Payton. Where did he come from? Was he the wizard they hired? He came from the tree of Bill Parcells, which was lunch pail coaching. Your thoughts, Brooke?
No, they're all coaches I wish we had.
Yeah. Could you imagine Sean Payton coaching Deshaun Watson? That guy wouldn't know what hit him. Bill Parcells? Here's the offense you're running. You either learn it, you sit on the bench. Right? I mean, Bill Parcells developed Tony Romo, Phil Simms, right?
Right.
Sean Payton, Drew Brees. Drew Brees wasn't too short for Sean Payton. He's only a Hall of Fame quarterback. Lombardi. Let's talk about, last point I want to make about leadership. Leadership is about developing your people. It's not hiring that MBA or the world's fastest painter who doesn't show up. It's developing your people. Vince Lombardi took over a 1-13 team. Look it up. 1958. On that team, he took a third-string quarterback named Bart Starr, turned him into a Hall of Famer. Jerry Kramer, Willie Wood, Willie Davis, Nitschke, Forrest Gregg, Jim Taylor, Paul Hornung, Herb Adderley. These guys, Henry Jordan, they're either all pro or Hall of Famers. Same thing with Chuck Noll. Mean Joe Green started drafting his players. So these coaches see the seeds of that talent and they develop them. That's what Bill Callahan did with Wyatt Teller. 5th round trade. Took him off the scrap heap, made him into an all-pro. Yeah, if you got a team that's underperforming, you got a bad coach. There's no excuse for dropping passes. You don't need to be a Hall of Fame wide receiver. You can't catch the ball, you don't play. Our left tackles, you keep illegal motion. Guess who's staying after practice? Hut. No, we're going to drill it in. Take a lap. Take another lap. All right? On film room, keep replaying that. You know what? Jerry Jeudy, drop another pass. Fannin, Njoku, keep rewinding that. I want everybody to see that a dozen times. And you know what that does? That sends a message to the locker room that production is required. Final thoughts, Brook, A'marri?
Yeah. I mean, it's a funny quote, it's pretty funny, because he's not producing. So a lot of correlations, between managing and sports. We always find a way to thread the needle.
Yeah, we have to. Got 2 different podcasts. Go ahead, A'marri. Final thoughts?
Yeah, Mike, I think we were having a good conversation yesterday with Travis, where it's just like boundaries are going to be constantly tested. And sometimes you confront it and it's fine for a while, but the point is it's every day. Every day you're still that same leader. Every day you have to have the same bar, the same standards for the kind of company you want to work for, the kind of team you want to manage. It's every day being consistent in your philosophy, your messaging, and your standards, and just being relentless about it. And we talk about this all the time, where once you set that standard in motion and you're on it, especially in the beginning, just repeatedly, people start to catch on, but you never really let your guard down. And you're always kind of looking around the corner and making sure that you're abiding by those same principles you want people working for you or with you to have.
And you got to back up your people.
Yeah,
you can't be this Weasley boss. Sometimes you got to go up to the front lines if you're a general. Sometimes you got to walk the factory floor. have to work, go in the kitchen, talk to the guys that are washing the dishes. You got to get your hands dirty.
Right.
And that's what being a parent is about. You don't just pawn off to the school to do the educating. You have to do the educating. You're the lead educator here. You know what, Kevin? You're not teaching these players if they keep dropping the ball, right? That's why dropping the ball is a talisman for the lack of teaching and accountability. So you get one of our foremen who's calling out, guy and his crew, guy's yelling at him. No, you back up your foreman. Don't talk to people like that. You got chewed out by the foreman for a good reason. The work sucks that day, but you want to be fair to everybody. Fair to everybody. That is the key. And you want everybody to understand that they have a responsibility to bring their best work to work and to the game. And if you're not going to bring it, then you don't play, right?
Yep.
You don't stay here. You're not working here. Not going to make an example out of somebody. You're not punishing somebody. That's what business is about. If you're running a shit operation, going up and doing a lousy job, guess what? You're going to be a failure. All right. So leadership, accountability, managing is hard, everybody. It's like learning Chinese. As I was saying the other day, doesn't happen overnight. But if you don't appreciate how difficult it is to manage, and you don't look in the mirror and say, I got to learn how to manage better, you're not going to do well. So we'll end on that note. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll pick it up next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Small Business Confidential. To support, please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Also add our podcast to your favorite streaming services. Everything is appreciated, and we'll be back soon with another episode and upload schedule. The person voicing the intro's name is Travis Riley. Thank you, Travis. And the music was done by our engineer, me, A'marri.